Hello and welcome to the Focus series, a podcast channel by the AUA Media Lab. My name is Armen Gasparian and I'm an alumnus of AUA. Graduated in 2013 with a master's in political science and international affairs. And today with me we have my dear colleague, Dr. Matthew Scott, from our headquarters of the organization that I represent, which is Raoul Wallenberg Institute. Our headquarters is in Lund, Sweden, and Matt has traveled to Armenia for an important event that I'm sure he's very eager to tell you about. And why don't we start from here? Tell us, why are you here in Yerevan, and how long do you stay? What brings you here?
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to AUA for inviting us to speak on the podcast. As at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, I lead the Human Rights and Environment thematic area, which is one of the 5 thematic areas that we have at the Institute. And the work that I do there involves quite a lot of international collaborations. So a little bit later, I'll get into what brings me specifically to Yerevan. But maybe I can say a bit about what is RWI in the first place, because that'll help to put this podcast in context. So RWI was established in 1984 as an initiative of the Faculty of Law at Lund University. And then it developed over the past 40 years into an international academic institution with collaboration initiatives across research, education, and international technical cooperation within those 5 thematic areas. So I do a lot of collaboration with universities. Asia Pacific is one of the regions where we do quite a lot on environmental issues, but also in bilateral collaborations in Zimbabwe and also here in Armenia. And so within that human rights and environment thematic area, we focus on 3 priority kind of issues. Certainly climate change is a major one. And we look primarily at climate change adaptation from a human rights perspective. This is something that goes across all of the work that we do, whether it's in human rights and environment or one of the other thematic areas. We're always integrating human rights perspectives. That's a distinctive contribution, I think, that we bring to these different areas. So we work on climate adaptation and mitigation issues. We look at biodiversity and healthy ecosystems. And we also focus quite a lot on one of the particularly acute impacts of climate change, which is climate-related displacement and migration. So those are some. And a third point I can mention is that we also co-convene an LLM in international human rights law with Lund University. I'll get soon to what I'm doing here in Yerevan, but that's a little bit about who I am, and let's take it from there.
All right. Before we move on to the next question, I think a bit of a segue here. RWI has, as you mentioned, the Institute works in many partner countries these days. And with Armenia in particular, we started in mid-2000s with a short project that was aiming to support the newly established Human Rights Defenders Office. And our work picked off during the last year of the 2010s, so 2019. And since 2023, we have an office in Armenia as well, in Yerevan. And AUA is actually one of our big partners, one of the biggest academic partners, for sure. So we are grateful for the opportunity that AUA gave us. We work closely with different departments. The School of Humanities and Social Sciences, for instance, more particularly the master's program in human rights and social justice. And right now, our colleagues are actually with partners from AUA in Lund, exploring new cooperation possibilities. And I hope the study tour will be a success for both AUA and our institute. But back to you. So when we talk about human rights, many people actually think of violations of Protestants or violations of human rights in different contexts. But I don't think many people think about the environment. So what's the intersection of human rights and the environment? And can you tell us more about the practicalities of what it means?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question because it really goes to the core of what we contribute at RWI intellectually. For maybe 15 years or so, there's no hard date for sure, but you could even go as far back as 1972 and the Stockholm Declaration on the Human Environment to see the connection between human rights and the environment. But it's really taken off in recent years, partly through the work of the UN Special Rapporteur on human rights and the environment, as well as wider human rights momentum through treaty monitoring bodies, as well as through court action, where you have seen civil society actors as well trying to leverage the normative power of international human rights law to get concrete action in a climate emergency. So there's been a lot of effort internationally, regionally, sub-regionally on climate change. But as we see, greenhouse gas emissions continue to grow, even after the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change, which committed to keeping greenhouse gas emissions or keeping the increase in global temperatures to below 2 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels. We're well on track to exceeding that. And a lot of people around the world are thinking, well, really screaming from the rooftops, we need to do something about this. And part of that is because even if it hasn't been framed in human rights language from the beginning, it has human rights impact. So we see the adverse impact of climate change and other parts of this triple planetary crisis that we talk about, which is also biodiversity loss and environmental degradation more broadly. We see the human impact in the loss of lives, but also wider impacts on the right to health, people getting sick, people with the movement of disease vectors, communicative diseases are increasing. In terms of pollution, respiratory diseases are increasing as a result of exhaust fumes from cars. Places like Yerevan is a pretty great example of that. Condensed urban areas with poor air quality is responsible for millions of deaths. And this is work coming out, for example, from another UN Special Rapporteur, the Special Rapporteur on Toxics. So what the connection is between human rights and environment broadly is that it's a legal framework that focuses both on the harms that people are experiencing in the context of this triple planetary crisis, but also on the responsibility of primarily states to take concrete action to reduce the exposure of people to harm in all ways that are within the capacity of a state to act through regulation, through subsidies, through increased awareness activities, and so on. And we've actually seen results from this kind of work in ways that haven't been successful historically. So what's called the human rights turn in climate litigation has resulted in judicial decisions from the European Court of Human Rights. Just a couple years ago, there was a groundbreaking decision in a case brought by elderly women from Switzerland who were complaining specifically and concretely about the adverse impacts of increasing heat on them as individuals as well as groups, and arguing that the Swiss government wasn't doing enough to reduce their contribution to the climate emergency through climate regulation, but also to help to adapt to the adverse impacts. And the European Court of Human Rights found a violation in that context. So that was a big win for climate justice. But there's been other cases. I mean, it's really a burgeoning of successful climate litigation based on international human rights law in regional courts, in international courts, in national courts as well. So there is quite a lot that human rights law has to offer in this kind of accountability space. But I'd also want to emphasize, because the work that we do, although we're also interested in the role of courts and other justice sector actors in advancing action on climate, we also work in distinctly different ways from this kind of more accountability-oriented work that litigators or civil society activists take. We have a different way of engaging with a wide range of different stakeholders involved in this space. So maybe I can tell you more about that.
Right. So when we talk about global warming in particular and the environmental effect, what many people think about is probably the rising sea levels and migration that's occurring as a result of that in many island nations like Tuvalu, for example, or Kiribati. And then you mentioned specifically the case of Switzerland, where elderly women took the government to a court for government inaction. But in many cases, specifically in the small island nations, for example, you can see that it's not action or inaction by the government per se that's causing this problem. It's on a more global level. So I think what you started with global action that's being taken or that needed to be taken. Can you elaborate on that? How we can support people from Kiribati, for example, or Tuvalu?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a really timely question because just a couple of months ago, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion on climate change. Before I say anything about that, I want to emphasize that for the Armenian audience, climate change is also very much an issue here. But there's much more media focus on these kind of more imminent scenarios of sea level rise and sinking island states and this kind of thing. And partly to their credit because the governments of those countries, but also civil society and students have been very vocal and very capable of leveraging media attention as well as political capital to get this issue onto the agenda. I mean, they've been arguing again through the climate context, through the UN Conference of the Parties, which tries to take action on implementing the Framework Convention on Climate Change at the Paris Agreement, but still without great success in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So what we saw with this initiative on the advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice is an initiative started by Pacific Island students, law students at the University of the South Pacific, who in their discussions with and around international law said, but can't we do something? Here we are living in these beautiful places where we have rich cultural, historical ties that we don't want to leave. Because often Pacific Island states are referred to as sort of the first climate refugees will be people coming from there. And they don't, without wanting to speak for all of the Pacific Islanders, many people say that they do not want to be the world's first climate refugees. They want to stay. And they want to compel the most responsible states, which is those who have the highest levels of greenhouse gas emissions, to stop, so that the warming that's already baked in will be the limit. But we continue to put greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, leading to potentially inevitable submersion of these islands. So a long campaign led to the International Court of Justice finding resoundingly, it's not a judicial process, it's an advisory opinion, but it has a very powerful normative force internationally, finding that states do have an obligation under international law, human rights law, as well as wider principles of state responsibility to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to also support the adaptation initiatives of most affected states. And this is a distinctive step forward because under environmental law processes like the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, it's always a question about states doing their best efforts. Whereas the advisory opinion says it's not good enough to just say you're doing your best in the political context that you're navigating. There's an obligation for which affected states may also seek compensation in the form of reparations or others. So law does a lot of things there. Of course, we have to see what the impact of that advisory opinion is, just as we need to see what the impact of the European Court of Human Rights decision is. But it is a powerful statement of what is required under the law that all states subscribe to as part of their membership of the United Nations and the UN Charter.
When we started this segment, I was thinking you would paint a rather grim picture, but towards the end of it, with people taking action, with students taking action, and then going back to what you said just before, with elderly women taking action into their own hands and going to a court, it seems like there is a lot of hope actually that, and then ordinary people like all of us can make a positive change, which is a very good takeaway. And if there are students, I hope they are watching us afterwards, be there AUA students or any other students, I think that's a very good takeaway from them, that they can also take action in their own hands and then go for a positive change in their own ecosystem and in their city, in their country, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think in states where the rule of law means something, there is a lot of space to hold authorities accountable, whether that's at the local level or whether it's at the national level or whether it's at the international level. And this is part of a human rights-based approach. But I guess, as I said earlier, it's not the only part, because it's quite easy when certain when people hear the word human rights, there's often, in my experience, a kind of defense mechanism that's introduced. When you say, I'm from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights, and I'm here to talk about climate change, there's a feeling like, okay, is this going to be the next litigation? Is there going to be a report about me and my failures as a government to achieve what I need to achieve under international law? Are you coming to Armenia, for instance, to lecture me as a government on my failures without necessarily even knowing the whole story? And I think that's where RWA has a distinctive contribution to make, because whilst we're very interested in the litigation dimension, we learn a lot from the jurisprudence and the ideas that are coming out of judicial decisions help us to understand what is expected of states. It's still an important distinction because the way that we work mostly is with states to support understanding of and appreciation and respect for human rights in the different contexts where we have expertise. So in the human rights and environment context, a lot of my work involves supporting states to see the issues that they already work on through a human rights perspective. So the Ministry of Environment is working on environmental issues, but they may not be seeing it from the perspective of the right to water or the right to health. And it's our claim and our experience, I think, that when you frame these issues which are often siloed in the language of human rights, it becomes we often say that the solution space is expanded because it's no longer a question of it's the Ministry of Infrastructure's responsibility or the Ministry of Environment's responsibility, the Ministry of Health's responsibility. It's a whole of society challenge that needs a multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral and multi-level approach. And the human rights perspective brings that. So that's sort of a brief description of some of the international technical cooperation work that we do in this thematic area, even if there's other aspects to it.
Yes, so a whole of government approach, whole of society approach, and if we go to the public management terminology that I'm personally coming from, it's you can say the environment or climate change has become a wicked problem, and it's even on a bigger level because even a whole of society approach doesn't solve all the problems unless you have solutions on a regional level, solutions on a global level. And speaking of that, what is that brings you to Armenia this time?
Yeah, well, and you say this time because I've come a few times now, and most of the work that I have been doing in Armenia relates to a public sector innovation program supported by the Swedish Institute. We started in 2024 with this program called Rights-Based Climate Adaptation. And the call went out for public sector professionals, whether at the national level or the subnational level, to apply. It's a course that's run in collaboration between the Raoul Wallenberg Institute and Lund University. And the ambition of this course is to bring together public sector professionals who are working on different dimensions of the climate emergency to examine their own expertise through the language of human rights. And the starting point for this is the Paris Agreement itself, which in its preamble makes express reference to the importance of adopting a human rights and gender equality approach. And so the starting question that we pose in this peer-to-peer learning and knowledge co-production process is, how do you do that? And so in Armenia, we brought together 10 participants from different public sector agencies, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure, amongst others, to look, and from their priority, the focus was on water scarcity. So we used the right to water as a way of looking at water scarcity in Armenia, breaking it down according to core dimensions of a human rights-based approach, which we articulate as a part of the FIRE framework. More information about that project and about the FIRE framework as well is available on the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. But they've produced a report, and today we had the final consultation meeting where we invited members of civil society, academia, as well as other government departments to first review the consultation draft and listen to the presentations and comment. We had a really lively discussion, and it's proof that there is a lot that a human rights-based approach has to offer. And what it offers is not solutions, but questions that might not be asked. So our role is not as water experts or as climate adaptation experts, but as human rights experts who can bring a lens to a complex problem that can help experts to collectively look for solutions.
Thank you very much. With this, I invite everyone who's interested on the topic to browse RWI's website and look up the report whenever it's available. And feel free to reach out to you and us as well. Our contacts are on the website. And this concludes the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.